What is going on, everyone? My name is Andy. Welcome back to another FPL video. In this one, it's the Game Week preview, so I'm going to go through a bunch of questions and topics ahead of Game Week 7 and give you my thoughts. So if you enjoy these videos, make sure to give it a like, hit that subscribe button if you're new around here as well, as we try and hit 350k before the end of the season. Now, the big news, apart from the blank Game Week for Brighton versus Crystal Palace in Game Week 8, which I recorded a whole video on yesterday, is that Chelsea have sacked Thomas Tuchel. Now, at the time of recording this video, they don't have a new manager in place, but it looks pretty likely that it's going to be Graham Potter. And by the time this video comes out and you watch it, that will probably have already been announced. Now, I want to keep this to a kind of an FPL focus rather than a general football focus. My opinion is, though, really quickly, it's a little bit harsh to sack Tuchel. I don't know if they've made a mistake or not, but they haven't been playing great football. The results haven't been great at the start of the season. We know what Chelsea are like. It didn't sound like he was getting on with Todd Bowley from all the reports that have come out afterwards. And if you're going to make a change, getting Graham Potter and hopefully for Chelsea fans a director of football might not be a bad long-term move. So it's not a complete disaster from a general footballing sense, even if it is a bit harsh on Tuchel, I think. But obviously we're more worried about what this means from an FPL perspective. So there's two things. One, Graham Potter's going to be the new manager. What does that mean for Chelsea? And two, Brighton are now without Graham Potter, who's been excellent for them. How will they now be? So I think one of the key questions is, will he continue with wing-backs? That seems pretty likely. He is a manager that likes to use different tactics in different games. So although he's played the wing-back system at Brighton a lot, he's not played it in every single game. He will play four at the back, depending on the opposition, depending on the setup, depending, I guess, on personnel and stuff like that as well. But I think he will continue with wing-backs. Does that now make Cucurella a better option under Potter? Because he played a lot of minutes last season for Brighton. My main thinking is, once Chilwell is fit, he will be the left wing-back more often than not. If you check Cucurella's starts last year, he played left centre-back and left-back a lot. He didn't necessarily play left wing-back that much. He did at the start of the season, but as the season went on, he was used a lot of left centre-back, and then games where they played four at the back, he played left-back. Now, obviously, Potter, I've got to get the names right now, Potter could use him in the same way. So for 5.2 million, he could still be a nice value option, but if he's not going to play as a wing-back, and that probably makes Chilwell better, even though he's a bit more expensive. He's a lot more of an exciting pick. And if he's going to play as a centre-back most games anyway, then Fofana is cheaper. So I think Cucurella might actually get more minutes once Chilwell is fit under Potter than maybe he would have done under Tuchel. It's hard to know for sure, but I think he'll get less of them at wing-back. We'll have to wait and see, of course. Kepa's only 4.4 million. I'm not suggesting you rush out and get him, but when a new manager comes in, it's almost like a fresh start for a lot of players. The only issue is we're all looking at wildcarding, maybe this week, Game Week 8, Game Week 9. You're not necessarily going to know exactly who's first choice straight away from the first couple of matches. It might be that he goes with the regular personnel, puts his imprint on the team in terms of tactics, how he wants them to press and play and stuff like that. But the personnel might not change too much until he gets to see them in training and stuff like that. But I've seen a few Chelsea fans kind of mention that Kepa might be a little bit better with his feet than Mendy is. And that's a big thing when you play for Graham Potter. We saw him put Sanchez in pretty quickly, I think, if I remember rightly, back when he took over at Brighton. So Sanchez, I don't think he necessarily played straight away, but he almost came out of nowhere, right? He was suddenly in the team and then he was first choice. We might see that with Kepa, and 4.4 million is pretty cheap. And we know that Brighton were a very good defensive team under Potter as well. So that's really interesting. I think James and Chilwell will probably still be the standout players. I think when you think about the other price points, Aubameyang's 9 million, Sterling's like nearly 10 million, if not already 10 million. They're very awkward price points. How will Mason Mount be used? We'll have to wait and see. So I think the defenders are still what we're looking at from Chelsea. Broja, if he got a bunch of starts, could be decent. But I don't think you bring Aubameyang in, even if that's a Tuchel signing, and just not play him. So I think the minutes will still be shared a little bit there. And of course, what about Brighton players? Now, we're in a pretty good position from an FPL point of view that this week it's Bournemouth away. So does that make them worse now that Potter probably isn't going to manage them? Yes, but the fact it's Bournemouth away means we shouldn't panic. If you've got Brighton players, they are still perfectly good to play this week. That team is going to know exactly how to play. Whoever takes charge for that match is probably just going to set them up in exactly the same way, pretty much compared to the last match. And then because that game in Game Week 8 is called off, they've got a bit of time to get a new manager in, and then it's the international break that is probably not so much of a panic. And I think, to be fair to Brighton, again, going a little bit off FPL, they are a very well-run club. Like, like the recruitment and stuff has been really good for players, so you would hope they'd have their, like, they must have known at some point that Potter was going to try and be picked up by one of the big six clubs. Like, it's already happened. I think Spurs maybe spoke to him last year. He didn't go. Obviously Chelsea, it's a little bit of a different story. He wants to go there for whatever reason. So they must have already known. I'm pretty sure they'd already have a list of candidates that they'd want to look at. So I wouldn't necessarily now think that Brighton players are bad. But given they've got Bournemouth away, then a blank, then I think it's Liverpool and Spurs. We don't need them anyway, so we can wait and see how they set up, what the formation is, who the new manager picks like regularly. As you know, we know that players like Trossard and Welbeck and players like that are probably going to play regularly, Dunk, Webster, etc. But there might be a little bit of a shift in exactly how they play, and that will be interesting to see. But I don't think we need to worry about it right now, because Bournemouth away is good, then it's a blank, then it's 2 bad fixtures, so we don't want them anyway. When you wildcard, if you do it around game week 7, 8 or 9, chances are you're going to have 0 Brighton players anyway, maybe 1 at most. So I just wouldn't worry about it. I do think it makes them probably worse overall, because Graham Potter was such a good manager, but I wouldn't completely rule them out. So it's an interesting time. It's not been confirmed. It probably will have been by the time you watch this video. I think it's probably a good thing for Chelsea. I think Graham Potter is a good manager. It's just that step up. Like, the pressure is on now. You have to deliver results pretty quickly. You're in the Champions League. You can't lose again. If that happens, the pressure gets on him quickly. We'll have to see how he reacts to that. He doesn't have that same pressure at Brighton, but I think we all agree he's a great manager. He's really good with the wing-back system as well. So this, for me, it just really makes me want Reece James back sooner rather than later, and possibly Chilwell as well. So we're going to talk about Game Week 8 versus 9 wildcard once again a little bit later in this video. But a lot of people ask me about Game Week 7 punts, because if you are set and locked into wildcard in Game Week 8, it does give you the potential to do something a little bit different, a little bit short term this week. For what it's worth, you don't have to go differential for the sake of it just because you're wildcarding next week. For example, if you only had 2 Arsenal players, bringing in Saka against Everton at home is a perfectly nice transfer to make. It just doesn't feel that punty, and therefore people will kind of get put off by it, but that is a really good move still. So you can still make obvious choices even if you're wildcarding next week. But if you're ever going to take a short-term punt, this is now the week to do it, the week before the wildcard. The problem is I just can't find too many standout options that are both excellent and people just don't have them because they've had really bad fixtures, or have a really good fixture. So Fernandes, for example, or Rashford, maybe Rashford's not so much of a punt, but Fernandes or Sancho or Anthony, for example, really nice punt in Game Week 8 against Leeds at home. Crystal Palace away, I'm not quite so sure about. I think the way Man United are playing right now is better than it has been before, but that is a slow and steady progress, right? I don't think they're suddenly going to go out and be like Man City or Liverpool or Arsenal in terms of creating a lot of chances. So for 9.8 million for Palace away, I'm not sure I like Fernandes. I like him in Game Week 8 against Leeds, although Leeds may be slightly improved in defence. That still seems like a good fixture to me. This week, I'm not so sure. So I would say the same about Anthony or Sancho as well. I think Rashford, for people that are looking at him, and by the way, he has been training, so he should be fit. We'll wait and see what happens in the Europa League. He's still a good buy, but he's a lot cheaper, so you can kind of get away with it. To go and find 9.8 million for Fernandes, I'm just not sure. But I put him on here because we are talking about punts. If we go to the top of the list, I think Leeds have got the best fixture this week, which is Nottingham Forest at home. Obviously, Brighton players have got Bournemouth away, but I think a lot of people at this point have already got their Brighton players if they're going to have them. So if we're looking at the next best fixture, it's probably Nottingham Forest at home, and that's what Leeds have. Sinisterra for 6.5 million. I really like him. He possibly could come into my team. Luis Diaz, I'm not sure if we've got a question about him later on. He played 90 minutes last night. Salah came off around the 62nd minute. Diaz stayed on. Now, I do wonder if Diaz is just one of those players, a bit like Salah, who plays 90 minutes pretty much week in, week out. I think one of the reasons he got brought off last night is Klopp just realised the game was absolutely done. He probably wasn't going to get back into it, and he probably needed a little bit of a rest anyway. But a bit like Salah, a bit like Foden and Cancelo at Man City, you hear Pep talk about how fit they are. They're always ready to play the next game. I do wonder if Luis Diaz is a bit like that Klopp can rely on him to always be ready and fit for the next game. So I don't think it's guaranteed that he misses out, but it is a 3 o'clock kickoff on Saturday, so we might get early team news. If not, Sinisterra is someone that I'm looking at. I don't think he's necessarily a player I trust long term just yet, but there's a bit of flair about him, and Nottingham Forest at home is a really nice fixture that I would look at him for a punt in midfield this week. Especially, like, again, you're wildcarding, right? You're only picking these players if you can get rid of them next week. Bamford is someone I'm really interested in. I think there's a couple of issues with him. One is his fitness. He's not really had too many minutes so far this year. So even if he starts, which I think he will, he could come off around the 55th, 60th, 65th minute, which isn't ideal. The other issue is you're either already on a 3-forward formation, in which case you've probably got 3 strikers you don't really want to sell this week, or you're on a 2-striker formation, and getting that third one might be tricky. And I think it depends how you do it. If you can downgrade a midfielder to someone else that you also want to take a punt on or bring in this week and get Bamford in, that seems like a good use. But if you're going to do something like Cancelo down to a bench fodder player, then upgrade your forward bench fodder to Bamford, that just doesn't feel as exciting. So I kind of like Bamford, but I think his minutes could be an issue. And obviously, it depends how you can get him. But I think if you're going to target fixtures, Nottingham Forest at home is the one to do. Iheanacho played the last game. There's obviously big risks with him because you don't know exactly if he's going to start this week. For what he's worth, I think he should be. I think Leicester are better in attack when he plays, whether it's with Daka or whether it's with Vardy or whether it's on his own, he should be playing. But obviously there's risk there, probably even more so than with Bamford. But I wanted to put him on because Aston Villa at home is a pretty good fixture. You could also look at obviously Maddison too. Not many people own him right now. They may well do on their wild cards because Leicester's fixtures, as bad as they've been, are really nice from game week 9 onwards. But for Aston Villa at home, not many people are going to own them. So you could look at Maddison. If Vardy's going to start, he could be an option as well. But I'd be a little bit worried about it. I feel like he probably just got a rest last week. But they did look, even though they got battered 5-2, I did think they looked a little bit better in attack when Vardy wasn't there. And he hasn't been great so far this season. So Iheanacho possibly. Nunez I really like. If you haven't got 3 Liverpool, you want to change them around a bit. He didn't start the Champions League game. I'd be very surprised if he doesn't start Wolves at home. I know everyone is hating Liverpool players right now. I know they were really bad against Napoli. That wasn't... Like, Napoli were really good. We have to give them credit, right? Playing Napoli away is not the same as playing Wolves at home. But that is probably one of the worst Liverpool performances I've seen in a long time. So I would be worried. But Thiago is back. He is a big help. I think when Thiago and Matip came on, Liverpool did do a little bit better. They weren't perfect by any stretch. And obviously Diaz got the goal. But they should do a little bit better against Wolves with those 2 players in their side. So again, if you wanted to take a punt that you can then get rid of straight away if you want to on wildcard, I really like Nunez. We've got a very small sample because he hasn't played a huge amount of minutes in the league. But 1.42 expected goal involvement is pretty damn good, right? It's not far off kind of what Haaland is doing right now. But obviously Haaland's doing it in a Man City team that's playing really well and over a lot more minutes. But Nunez could definitely be a punt. Then just to round off, Antonio against Newcastle. I think he's been looking a little bit better the last couple of games. I just worry about how many goals West Ham can actually score against Newcastle. I think that could be a draw, like maybe a 1-1, possibly a 2-2, something like that, or maybe one side just edges it 2-1. I don't see a huge amount of goals, but I do think Antonio's been playing better recently, and obviously you got Fernandes. But let me know in the comments below if there's any other punch you would go for. Obviously, if you're going to go for Antonio, Bowen could be an option as well. But both their numbers are right down compared to last year, so that would worry me a little bit. But there we go. There's a few punts. Let me know in the comments below. Have you got anyone better? Okay, so we probably all know by now that Newcastle have some pretty good upcoming fixtures. In Game Week 7, it is West Ham away. So while I wouldn't go out of my way to avoid Newcastle players, I think it's from Game Week 8 onwards that a lot of people are looking to bring them in, especially Isak. He's going to be on a lot of Game Week 8 wildcards. So this question's about him. Would Isak still play as a striker when Wilson comes back into the Newcastle setup? If he doesn't, does that not hamper his appeal? So that is possible, right? When Wilson is fully fit, he could be the number 9. Eddie Howe might still play with a formation that's kind of got a front 3 rather than 2 strikers. But ultimately, I don't see Isak missing too many minutes, right? He's too big of a sign-in and ultimately too good of a player to be on that Newcastle bench. So it doesn't mean that he can never be rested, never be rotated, but he is going to play more often than not, even if that means being off the left or off the right. And he has played there before in his career. So it's not that he's only ever played as a number 9 and he can't play anywhere else. He's definitely adaptable to that team. It might be that Isak keeps Wilson out of the team. I find that unlikely because I think Wilson is also a top player. So I think having him and Isak in the team is just better for Eddie Howe. But that could happen, right? That is something that, you know, is a possibility, I would say. But ultimately, if the only worry you have is Wilson coming back and being a forward and Isak having to play somewhere else, I would still go for him, because we don't know if that will definitely dent his appeal. He could still get just as many attacking returns because he's that good of a player playing on the right or on the left, right? So again, I wouldn't let Wilson put me off. And also, the track record for injuries for Wilson and the likes of Saint-Maximin are not that good. So there is every chance that even when Wilson comes back, he's back out of the side sooner rather than later, and Isak's playing as a number 9 again. And if he's not, Saint-Maximin could be out, so he could be on the left. And if not, he could just play on the right as well. So I think Isak's a really nice option from game week 8 onwards. I think there's lots of forwards, so I don't think he's essential by any means. But if the only thing putting you off is Wilson, I would still go for him. So I think as long as Salah isn't scoring goals, we're going to continue to see this question come up. And I think it's now 4 games without a goal for him. So Bournemouth, Newcastle, Everton, and obviously Napoli in the Champions League as well. That's quite a long run for a player of Salah's calibre. So we probably should be a little bit worried. So who are the best 2 premiums on Wildcard? It could also be reframed to who are the best 2 premiums going forward. I think we can all agree that Haaland is the best one that everyone should have. If you don't have him, figure out how you're going to do that sooner rather than later. We will stick to Haaland, De Bruyne, Son, Kane and Salah for the purposes of this question. Obviously, Salah to Sterling, get a bit of money, target Chelsea's fixtures under Potter, could be an option, but we'll stick to the 5 premiums, right? For what it's worth, for game week 7, I've got no interest in selling Salah whatsoever. Fair enough, Captain Haaland, but I think Wolves at home is a pretty good fixture. I know, obviously, Wolves haven't conceded a huge amount of goals, but at Anfield, I would always back Liverpool, and I know they've not been great. I fully appreciate that so far this season, but I do think Thiago being back, and as long as he starts at the weekend, obviously we'll have to wait and see from Klopp if he's fit enough to do that, but he did come on against Napoli last night, so you'd expect him to start. That is big for Liverpool. I think both from a defensive and an attacking point of view, if you look at the amount of times he won the ball back last night compared to someone like James Milner. And by the way, part of Liverpool's problems is the amount of minutes they've had to give James Milner so far this season. It is not ideal whatsoever. Look, he's a great professional, that, and I'm sure he is fully fit. But like everyone, like I've spoke about with Ronaldo, age catches up with you, and he's just not who Liverpool need to be playing kind of almost week in, week out. I know he's not playing 90 minutes, but he's featuring a lot. So that's not good. Thiago is a massive upgrade defensively, and of course from an attacking point of view. So I would not be surprised if Liverpool score a few goals this week. So I wouldn't get rid of Salah this week. I think the conversation is really around game week 8 onwards. And of course, if you're going to wildcard in game week 9, for example, you could take a punt on, not even a punt, but get rid of Salah for Chelsea, and then if you wanted to, bring him back in. I think the issue for me, and for what it's worth, I'm probably going to stick with Haaland and Salah, unless I can find a massive upgrade I can make by getting rid of Salah, which right now I can't see. And that is mostly due to fixtures, because yes, Liverpool's fixtures aren't great, but it's not like the other teams have amazing fixtures where they're playing like Nottingham Forest and then Everton and then Fulham, etc. So for Man City, it's Spurs at home this week, then it's Wolves away. So a lot of people, I know Man City are attacking better than Liverpool right now, but a lot of people are telling me, well, Wolves at home is not that great of a fixture. Surely Wolves away is no better then. So that's one thing. Then it's Man United at home. I still would expect Man City to get the win there, but I do think there is some improvement with Man United so far this year. Southampton at home is definitely a good fixture. Then it's Liverpool away, Arsenal away. Are these fixtures good enough to go from Salah to De Bruyne? Bearing in mind, De Bruyne is not much of a goal scorer. He will get some goals, of course, but if you look at his expected goals versus his expected assists, it's quite clear from the stats and from watching him, he's much more likely to get you an assist than a goal. And if you're ever going to target captaincy at Man City, it's always going to be Haaland anyway. So that kind of dampens De Bruyne as an option a little bit for me. You already know my thoughts on De Bruyne. I just don't think he's a great way to spend your money at this point this season. Maybe he will be at some point, but I still think double defence has got something to say as well. So I don't particularly like De Bruyne at 12.2 million. So the other two options are Son and Kane. Now, this week, I just don't see why you would sell Salah against Wolves at home for Spurs players against Man City away. If you're going to wildcard in game week 9, you could definitely make a case that Salah to Kane or Son for Leicester at home is a good punt, and then wildcard in game week 9, and either keep your Spurs players if you want to, or get Salah back. But then it's Arsenal away. If Brighton continue to perform how they have done, that's not a great fixture away either. Everton at home's okay, but from game week 12 onwards, I think I would want Salah back. So I just don't know if there's enough upside with these fixtures to warrant going with a Spurs premium player over Salah. Again, that Leicester at home fixture is really nice. So either you're wildcarding in game week 9, you get the Spurs player in, and then maybe you look to wildcard them out if you want to. If you're wildcarding in game week 8, you could definitely start with a Spurs player, and then maybe look to get Salah back. I think it's less risky than at any point over the last 5 seasons probably to get rid of Salah, because captaincy is a huge thing and everyone's going to be going for Haaland, and therefore if Salah does get a big haul where he gets 2 to 3 returns in one game, it's not going to affect you as much as it would have done in the past. So if you're going to do it, this is the time to do it. I'm just not sure that I will, because Arsenal away, Brighton away is not that great. Everton at home is pretty nice, and in that week I think Salah has Man City at home. Man City at home. So you could make a case that Spurs fixtures are slightly better, but they are not so good. I think it's absolutely essential to have one of their players. So it depends how you feel. And obviously, like I said, Son's not got any returns. One assist so far this season. He hasn't scored. He's actually doing even worse than Salah, if that was possible. And they've had some pretty nice fixtures as well. But also his minutes, right? He is coming off early a few times. Not every game. He's played 90 against Southampton, 90 against West Ham when they were still trying to obviously make sure they got try and get the win there. And Fulham was 83. So it's not like he's constantly being brought off in the 70th minute. There is maybe slightly more concerns than in previous seasons, just because they've got a few more options on the bench. The other option is, of course, Harry Kane. Harry Kane's probably the one that I prefer. He is doing really well this season. He could, if you really want to go for it, a nice differential captain in game week 8. Rather than going for Haaland against Wolves away, you could go for Kane against Leicester at home, but we won't discuss captaincy. He just blocks a forward spot, and I think you can definitely go Haaland and Kane in your wildcard or in your normal team going forward, but then you've got to get a cheaper midfielder in, and I think right now, if you look at the kind of 8 million and below, there's not necessarily a huge amount of options. Even if you wanted Saka, he's got some pretty poor fixtures coming up, and it might be that he's so good you just keep him in your side anyway, but that's my only concern with Kane, really. I don't really have many concerns about him not scoring, not assisting. I think he's been playing really well. He's on penalties. He's going to get more minutes than Son every single week as well. So they are all good things. It's just whether or not it messes up your structure. Because if you're looking at Haaland, Mitrovic and Isak or Tony, you can also fit Kane in instead. So then you're back to Salah, De Bruyne or Son. And despite everything that's happened, I still think that Salah is the best option out of those three right now. So if you're going to get rid of Salah, not necessarily game week 7, but game week 8 onwards, that is the time to do it. Figure out, by the way, just to go back quickly, how to get him back from game week kind of 12 onwards, because Liverpool's fixtures, okay, West Ham at home, maybe you can go without him for that one, but I don't care how bad Liverpool have been, I'm not going without Salah for Forest away and Leeds at home in game weeks 13 and 14, and then even in game week 16 it's Southampton at home. So whatever you decide to do, make sure you've got a route back to Salah one way or another. I do really like Harry Kane. I don't think that Son is going to keep up this record of just not scoring goals. The tables will turn for him soon. It could be Leicester at home. So I do like that fixture in 8. I just think the ones after it until game week 12 are not so good for Spurs that we have to sell Salah for them. That's just my opinion. Okay, so what's my take on Man United players, including Bruno Fernandes and the defence, especially Dalot? I've got the fixtures on screen. We'll go through them in a minute. If you're going to pick up a Man United defender, Dalot is, to me, clearly the best option. He looks to be nailed on. Wan-Bissaka might get minutes at some point, but for most Premier League games, Dalot is going to start. He seems to be the most attacking as well. I looked at the numbers for expected goals, expected assists, way ahead of Malacia on the other side. I think you can see that from the eye test as well. He's also pretty good for bonus. He's picked up 6 bonus already this season. Malacia only 2. And then you've got the centre-backs, Varane and Martinez. Martinez is the same price. I think given his height, we're not expecting too many headed goals from set pieces. I think quite often he stays back as well. And then Varane is more expensive, and I just don't really see him as someone with a huge amount of goal threat from set pieces either. So Dalot is the one. I look at those fixtures and I think straight away, Man City away, Spurs at home, you probably... Like, if you have a Man United defender, you could play them, but it's not ideal. And then you look at it, Crystal Palace away, Everton away, 2 away games. They could get a clean sheet there, but again, it's not necessarily ideal. So then you're looking at Leeds at home, Newcastle at home, which might be okay. I don't think that's a great fixture run for a defender, but what I will say is Dalot at 4.5 million could be a nice bench option. I've looked at the Game Week 8 wildcard a few times, and I think there is one... So if you're looking at maybe... I don't know, some of you might not even be looking at keeping Trent, but let's say you go for James, Cancelo, a second Chelsea defender, and maybe a cheap player like Nico Williams. There is one slot open that I think there could be a bit of discussion about exactly who fills it. Like Luka Dean, for example, Villa have some good fixtures. I'm not going to get into a conversation right now about whether or not you should be buying Luka Dean, but he is someone I've looked at. West Ham defence maybe. So a Man United defender at 4.5 and a defence that is improving. Again, no one is saying they're Man City or Liverpool or Spurs right now, but I think everyone can agree it is improving. I think it's a pretty good option to have on the bench. So I don't mind it, but I don't think you're going to want to play him every single week. I think with the attackers, I do have some slight concerns over whether Rashford will continue to perform and score goals and get assists from that number 9 position. And then when Martial is back, Rashford then becomes a little bit of a minutes risk in my eyes. Not just Rashford, but all those players that play kind of left wing and right wing. But I think right now, for his price at 6.5 million, he's a pretty good option for Crystal Palace away, Leeds at home. The way that Man United play against teams like Man City could also be okay there. I think with Fernandes, look, when Ronaldo's not on the pitch, and he does seem to be getting subbed on quite a lot, Fernandes is on penalties, but I just think the way Man United are playing right now, I don't know if we're going to see a return to that Bruno Fernandes of like kind of when he first came in, when he's getting goals and assists every single week almost. And I just think for nearly 10 million, it's a very awkward price point to put him in at. So if, for example, you're wildcarding in game week 9 and you wanted to take a punt in game week 8 and maybe do Salah to Fernandes and use that money to make a different punt elsewhere as well, you could do that. But I don't think I'd be looking to spend, what is he now? Is he like nearly 10 million? Yeah, 9.8 million on Bruno Fernandes. I just think there's better ways to spend your money. He will get returns. And as Man United continue to improve, that will obviously build up and build up. But 9.8 million, I think I'd just rather try and get Sterling in my team. So I think Rashford for 6.5 is good. I think Anthony is still probably building his fitness a little bit. Sancho's probably more likely to get you an assist than a goal as well. So I think Rashford's probably the one. If you want to defend it, it's got to be Dalot. So I've talked about the Game Week 8 versus 9 wildcard a few times on various different videos so far this week, but we're going to quickly go through it again. The question is, it might not sound Game Week 7 related, but it kind of is if it means rolling a transfer versus taking a 1 week punt in Game Week 7. I fully agree with that. If you can, you should lock in exactly when you're going to wildcard, because that will change your transfer strategy beforehand, right? So for my team, I got 2 free transfers this week. If I decide that I'm going to wildcard in Game Week 8, then do I really need Cancelo against Spurs at home? No, I'd probably move him to James, although Fulham away is not necessarily that easy. But they are the kind of moves I'm looking at. If I'm not going to wildcard till Game Week 9, well, Cancelo and Ederson have got Wolves away in Game Week 8. I could probably look to keep them. And James has got Liverpool at home. So it doesn't really give me an advantage over the next 2 weeks. So you definitely need to think about exactly when you're wildcarding. Because if you can lock it in, it will help your transfers before that. So these are some points that I would think about. So one is just being team dependent and not necessarily what your team looks like right now, but also how your wildcard is going to look like going forward. Do you actually want to get rid of all your Liverpool players? Because if you do, that might change what week you wildcard in. You could look to wildcard in Game Week 8 to get rid of them all and then just not have them at all. You could look at maybe holding that wild card till Game Week 9, knowing that your Chelsea players are going to play Liverpool at home, your Liverpool players are going to play Chelsea away. That might not be a great match. You can then look to transfer them out if you want to hold, if you want them on your wild card moving forward. Use some transfers on a couple of punts in Game Week 8, then wild card them back in. So it's not just what your team looks like right now, it's what your wild card is going to look like. Because if you don't want those Liverpool and maybe a few less Chelsea players, then wild carding in Game Week 8 suddenly becomes a lot better. If you do want them, transferring them out and then going for some better punts in Game Week 8, like Man United versus Leeds at home, for example, and then wildcarding them back in might be the better option. So it's going to depend on the team, etc. In Game Week 8, there's a lot of players, especially kind of Mitrovic and Newcastle players in particular, that might go up in price. Now, the wild card doesn't really matter because as far as we know, any transfers that are made based on wildcard. So if I wildcard and transfer Trippier in, that doesn't count to his overall transfers needed to have a price rise. But people are going to be looking at these players anyway. So you might be priced out of your team by Game Week 9 if you wait. So that's one thing to think about. I wouldn't let it massively affect your decisions, but if it's close, it could just be worth going a week earlier, right, and just hoping that everything goes okay. How many and which Arsenal players do you want Game Week 9 onwards? So if you're going to stick to like kind of 2 and even maybe have 3 Arsenal players going forward, you really need to wildcard in Game Week 8 before Brentford away. If you want to get rid of Jesus to put in like Tony, Isak, Mitrovic, maybe even Solanke, who knows, then you might need a wildcard to switch around those players, possibly to get Saka in. So think about that as well, because in Game Week 8 they've got a pretty good fixture, Brentford away. Game Week 9 onwards, it's not so good. So that's another thing to think about. We won't go through this too much because I've already kind of touched on it, but which punch you like in Game Week 7 versus 8? If your team can handle Game Week 7 and 8 as it is, where do you prefer to make those kind of more risky differential choices? There's a few players this week, as we've already discussed, but there might be even a few more in Game Week 8. And it's not just the players you bring in, it's also the players you can take out. So taking out Liverpool players to take punts this week doesn't feel as good as it does in Game Week 8. And also the number of Brighton and Palace players. Some of you might just be screwed. You might have 3 Brighton, 1 Palace player, maybe Zaha, Sanchez, I don't know, Duncan, Gross, or whatever it might be. And in Game Week 8, none of them are playing. You probably haven't got enough transfers to deal with that, so possibly you should wildcard a little bit earlier. There we go, that is the Game Week 7 preview. If you've enjoyed that and found it useful, make sure to give it a like, and of course hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. It's completely free to do, and we are well on our way to 350,000 subscribers. Leave me a comment below, let me know if there's anything you disagree with, any players that you're looking to punt on this week that I've missed out as well. Leave a comment below, I'll try and get back to as many as possible. Otherwise, I'll leave it there. We'll be back tomorrow with another video. I'll catch you then.